This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. Good morning, I am Carrie Saldo. It is July 24th. Welcome to The Rundown here on NEPM and streaming live on YouTube. I'm joined in this studio this morning by Chris Mazza, Executive Editor of Reminder Publishing, Bridget Davis, Assistant Professor of Public Policy at the University of Massachusetts Amherst.
Good morning.
Good morning. And making his debut on the panel, a senior reporter at Commonwealth Beacon, Jordan Woolman. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Later in the show, our rundowners will weigh in on Northampton being among the 10 municipalities in the state that are trying to kick fossil fuels. At the same time, utility companies have invested about $100 million in natural gas pipeline upgrades. The town of South Hadley is considering lifting a ban on cannabis businesses as a statewide ballot measure wants to once again ban recreational cannabis. And what's the future of local milk production in the 413? We'll dig into that as well. If you have thoughts, as always, email therundown@nepm.org. And as I said, be sure to check out our YouTube live stream. All right, let's dive in. Our first topic this morning, the headline from NEPM's Phil Bishop. Massachusetts think tank urges state to avoid federal school voucher program. And Phil Bishop was reporting for NEPM on this. And Phil is making rundown history this morning. He is not only our program engineer today, but he's joining us to discuss his reporting. Phil, thanks for doing double duty.
Yeah, of course. I love hitting buttons and I love talking about the news.
Perfect.
It all works out for me.
Love it. So the vouchers that you reported on are meant to fill a funding gap because the Trump administration has elected to dismantle the federal Department of Education. But
yes.
Tell us more about how this school voucher program would work.
Yeah, so it's really fascinating because, and this is what really the Massachusetts Budget and Policy Center really wanted to focus on. You know, it's called a federal school voucher program, but the program itself is not about distributing any federal money to states for education. It instead establishes a framework for private organizations collecting private donations to invest that money into either public or private schooling. So it is not necessarily, you know, what we kind of understand as like traditional funding streams for public education. Instead, it is sort of hoping that the private sector, the nonprofit sector, that these things will collect these funds and disperse them as they see fit. It's not, the federal government doesn't determine who gets vouchers through this program. The state would not determine who gets vouchers through this program. It would be these things called scholarship granting organizations, or SGOs.
And when we are talking about this, we're talking about primary and secondary education.
Yes, this
correct?
is K through 12.
Yeah.
This is K through 12.
And so the Massachusetts Budget and Policy Center says that this program is weighted to benefit private schools. Bridget, you work in higher education, public, as we talked about UMass Amherst. But what do you make of this program?
Yeah, I mean, I taught in middle schools and high schools and Title I schools in Atlanta and Chicago, and I'd say the reporting from the Budget Center is really like their analysis is taking up the fact that the scholarship granting organizations, private schools already have those established, right? Public schools do not have those kinds of organizations established or that infrastructure. And so this really is a way to start funneling funds, I think, towards private schools and private school options for enrichments. And I think that's the concern here, is in terms of that equity. And then I think there's also while there's not federal dollars immediately coming down for the voucher program, there are tax benefits for people who donate to those. And then there is some kind of promise of incentives coming once that structure is in place. And so I think that there's some concerns about, in the long run, this really undoing a big push in the Commonwealth for equitable funding and more. I mean, we're still thinking about that in rural Western Mass for sure in terms of the formula, but I think it's a real stress on, I think, pushes over the last 25 years to get to a much more equitable funding.
Now, a statement from the White House says that the funds could be used, quote, to send your child to a new school, pay for private tutoring, or provide other educational support. You know, I'm aware of parents who have kids who are struggling in public schools to get the supports and services that they need. So, Chris Mazza, I could see a parent reading this statement from the White House and saying, well, wait a minute, that sounds like a pretty good deal for me. My kid's in public school and we need more support. We need better support for this kid. We're paying for private tutoring out of our pocket or things like that. What do you make of it?
So I'm going to admit that I have a little bit of a bias here as the spouse of a public school educator, but certainly with something like this, especially even with that wording, it definitely feels like a push towards privatizing education. But the wording it's written in such a way that is meant to be enticing for that. And, that's probably the thing that would be the thing that I would tell any parent is make sure you're reading the fine print and make sure you understand exactly what you're looking at when you're looking at this kind of option.
I think an important caveat here also to insert is that governors ultimately are the deciders in this, right? The governor, Phil, needs to choose whether or not Massachusetts will opt into this. Have we heard anything from Governor Healy as of yet as to where she stands?
We do not have, to my knowledge, to my research, we do not have any particular statement from the governor pursuant to this program in particular. I do think, pursuant to the state's desire to have a robust public school system, this does not seem like something that Massachusetts would want to do, but I think it's about, pursuant to what Chris was saying, a lot of this language is enticing. It is enticing to take advantage of every benefit that you possibly can, for the purpose of education. And so I think it's, as we sort of speak about some of the details and some of the existential ways that this program is weighted towards private education, it doesn't seem like something Massachusetts would like, but I do think it's about, ensuring that, as much as like everyday people, that lawmakers understand, I think, some of the caveats to this. The one other little nugget of it that I do want to just get out there as we're talking about it, this was a huge part of it. For these vouchers, under this voucher program, eligibility is 300% of annual median income. So it's not, when we talk about a lot of benefit programs, the idea is we're trying to serve the underserved communities. So you look at people who are at like 50% AMI, people who make less than what people make on average in an area.
Median income.
Area median income. And so this is for 300%. So it's like, the Mass budget has a map where you can look at like Springfield, and like if you're in Springfield and you make $300,000 a year, you will be eligible for this program, even though the AMI in Springfield is like $96,000 a year. So it ends up people who we would typically assume do not need these types of programs could end up crowding out some of the people that we do understand definitely need them.
Jordan Woolman, you've reported on the state chewing on a range of environmental policies. What do you make of this historic potential shift in education?
I think this is part of a larger dilemma and decision for Democrats. How much do you work with Trump? Is it ever okay to work with Trump if it could potentially benefit your state? Obviously, the governor has nothing to do with the decision to dismantle the Department of Education at the federal level. But, I think it's you're sort of dealt what you're dealt, and Trump has made that decision and now, is pursuing this program. And so do you buy into it? Do you opt in, or has he sort of tainted the politics so much and soured the system so poorly that it's better to just go it alone? Of course, it's not quite that black and white because states need disaster assistance and rely on federal money for programs like SNAP and Medicaid. But we do see this reoccurring theme here, and it's coming up again here, about whether blue state officials like Governor Healy should sort of link up and sort of take what you're given, and these are the cards that you're being dealt, or do you say, nope, we reject that morally or fiscally or sort of whatever the case is, and decide to just go it alone and say no thanks to the federal government's help.
The politics. Oh, go ahead, Bridget.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think there's kind of two interesting things here, because I think that dilemma is exactly right. And we saw the Healy administration actually get a large grant from the Trump administration and use it to serve underserved schools, and it was for supplemental tutoring. And I was actually really interested in that move, but they did a great job of drawing down a bunch of dollars and having them go to underserved schools. And so I think this one creates kind of like, as Phil said, the opposite kind of thing, because it doesn't actually prioritize underserved schools and students. But I think that, and then alongside, Healy just added money to the budget for public education, and it's election year. So I think there's a number of things kind of there together, but I think this one may be a harder sell because of that 300% eligibility and because of who it seems like it will benefit.
And Massachusetts is in a somewhat unique position in that the dollars from the federal government that go to public primary and secondary education are not as large as we see in some other states. So that might give Massachusetts a little bit of wiggle room here to say, you know what, we can go it alone. We can do this a different way. All right, well, plenty more to come on this, I'm sure. The program is set to launch in January 2027 for those states that do opt in. Phil Bishop, thank you so much for pinch hitting, doing double duty. Please
I'll
keep
still
us
be hitting buttons
on
for the rest
air.
of the show.
Perfect. Great. All right, moving on. 10 communities in Massachusetts went fossil fuel free. Then utilities spent $100 million on natural gas infrastructure there. That was the headline on reporting, Jordan Wallman, that you did recently for Commonwealth Beacon. I'm going to quote part of your reporting. Perhaps nowhere in Massachusetts are the tensions associated with moving away from natural gas for heating our homes and buildings more pronounced than in the state's 10 communities that have pledged to go fossil fuel free. Northampton in R413 is among those big 10 in this official statewide program. Your piece goes on to say, Jordan, those communities are now on the front lines of what is essentially an experiment to see if they can tangibly kickstart a complicated transition off natural gas and meet local climate targets while not scaring away developers with high costs and new burdensome red tape. Jordan, why did you want to take a look at this issue now?
A few reasons to look at this issue now. First of all, people are struggling with truly skyrocketing energy bills. And there's this hunger, I think, out there to understand why our bills so high right now. You sort of add on top of that this constant month-to-month anxiety that people feel. You just don't know what that energy bill is going to be at the end of the month. And these expensive gas pipe replacements that are continuing to take place, even in the fossil fuel-free communities, are one piece driving those bill increases. I also think it's important to follow up on what was a groundbreaking program that launched a few years ago and look to see how it's going. Is it paying dividends? Has it truly led to any change? Are we truly able to wean off fossil fuels? So I think both from an accountability standpoint and just a public service standpoint of figuring out, sort of lifting up the hood and seeing why our energy bill is so high, those are two big reasons why I think it's important to look at this program now.
As you referenced, these got going January 2024 and early 2025. Do you have a sense yet of how these communities have been able to transition away from natural gas? Maybe something specific from Northampton for folks here in the 413?
Yeah, so, it's still early. The state did a first sort of preliminary assessment on the program and seems to find that things are going okay in the sense that these 10 communities are starting to issue permits for fossil fuel-free buildings. This only applies to new construction and major renovations on existing buildings. But it's important to remember that every one of these 10 communities has built-in exemptions. Places like labs, research, medical facilities are oftentimes in these 10 communities exempt from having to be fossil fuel-free. In Northampton, they actually even exempt commercial kitchens, which are basically restaurants.
Who love to cook with gas stoves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to reduce the reach of this ordinance that is trying to truly ensure that new buildings and those with major renovations are built without oil and gas hookups. And actually in Northampton, a really interesting example, last year, a hotel developer actually walked away from a proposed project because of both the fossil fuel-free ordinance and because Eversource wasn't able to increase its gas supply to service the potential hotel. So, we're seeing these tensions sort of bubble up here and there, and that was a pretty interesting one in Northampton.
Now, there are other independent stabs that are going fossil fuel free. Among those, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but Amherst College has formally pledged to go fossil fuel free by 2030 on its campus. And UMass Amherst, Bridget, where you work, 100% renewable energy and eliminating fossil fuel by 2032. Do you think maybe the idea for a city or town to come on and try and pilot this was maybe too ambitious, coming at it from a more insular kind of closed perspective of a college campus? Is that perhaps a more palatable bite to take at this? Especially given what Jordan found, that we're spending $100 million upgrading the current infrastructure that we have because we can't just abandon it.
I don't know. I would read that really differently. I would read that like the municipalities are creating an important push that actually a lot of consumers want. And I mean, honestly, right now, like heat pumps and non-fossil fuel things are so much cheaper. And lots of people, as they start to see their neighbors have all electric or an induction stove, like they want them, and they are cheaper now. So people, I think, are finding it much more appealing, and especially as we're watching fuel prices skyrocket. So I think the question here is like, I don't know. It would be interesting to look back and look at the investment in fixing leaks prior to the reduction in use of fossil fuels, because it's clear that the companies are putting lots of money into making sure that it looks like they're doing lots of repairs in these exact 10 communities. I would wonder how it compares to their repairs in not those communities. And I've read really great reporting on the fact that in those 10 communities where they're putting in all electric, and when they're putting in, some of them are doing geothermal, people are coming and asking that are not currently on the plan to be transitioned, are coming and asking to be all electric or to be geothermal, and quickly. So I think they're working to try to retain the customers they have in those places, which you understand from a business perspective, but I think there's a lot to wonder about there.
Yeah. Chris Mazza, what's come top of mind for you on this one?
Well, I think that you guys have touched on a lot of it, but one of the things is it's a balancing act, because I think about, it wasn't all that long ago where not far from this very studio there was a large gas explosion. So you have to think about the safety issue here, and certainly you can look at it and say, okay, well, is this, they're making it look like we're doing this so that, to make up for some past deferred maintenance, et cetera. But the bottom line is, at some point, you can't, as you said, abandon the system while so many consumers are still using it. So it's a difficult balancing act, I think. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes forward. Certainly, Eversource is looking to maintain customers, but how can these two parallel tracks, benefit people so that we can finally get to that point where we are able to be, fossil fuel free?
We will have to leave that there. There for today. Jordan's reporting can be checked out on Commonwealth Beacon. Still ahead here on the rundown, the town of South Hadley considers lifting a ban on cannabis businesses, and local production takes a hit in Berkshire County. You are listening to the rundown here on 88.5 NEPM and streaming live on YouTube. I'm Carrie Saldo. Stay with us.
The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, offering assisted living and compass memory support with evidence-based treatment for those with memory loss. More at armbrookvillage.com.
Welcome back to the rundown here at 88.5 NEPM. I am Carrie Saldo, joined by journalist Chris Mazza and Jordan Woolman and assistant public policy professor Bridget Davis. Let's dive back in. South Hadley to explore eliminating a ban on marijuana establishments. This was reporting from Reminder Publishing by Tyler Garnett on your team there, Chris. Tyler wrote, South Hadley will look at the possibility of allowing marijuana establishments to operate in town, which, if decided, would undo an 8-year ban on the businesses. Why is South Hadley proposing this change now, Chris?
Well, I actually talked with Tyler about this, in preparation of this, and basically the discussion is, it seems like it's more of a let's leave no stone unturned when looking for more funding, more tax revenue and things like that, because South Hadley has faced quite the fiscal crisis over the past, truthfully, it's been bubbling for a few years, but this year especially, they've had a couple of proposals for tax overrides that did not end up passing, that have left especially the school district and the libraries, among some other departments, with some really difficult choices to make.
Yeah, it's easy to see why South Hadley might look at this and think, hey, there's money to be had here. The State Cannabis Control Commission reported in January that more than $1.65 billion in sales came through in 2025, setting a new annual record.
Wow.
And if you're thinking like me, I saw that bigger number and I thought, well, that's just because everything is more expensive, right? So that number went up. But the CCC went further and said that, no, they actually saw a record number of unique transactions as well, in addition to that larger number. So it generated $289 million, in state tax revenue in fiscal 2025. And then, of course, local cities and towns can opt to put an additional 3% on top of what the state already takes as its cut, 6.25% sales tax and a 10.75% marijuana excise tax. However, State House News Service reported in June that cannabis businesses have been struggling to stay afloat amid dropping marijuana prices, and there have been a slew of change of ownership applications during this last meeting. So this is a really, sticky issue. But back to South Hadley's potential reversal now to allow this recreational marijuana. It comes as long-awaited discussions about social consumption of these products are forefront now, and they're being hammered out by the state CCC. Jordan, what do you make of the timing on this one?
It's really interesting to me because of the ballot question that's set to go before voters this fall, asking them to recriminalize marijuana. So I think the general thinking is that ballot measure is sort of a long shot to pass in a state like Massachusetts. And developments like this kind of only underscore that line of thinking, where a community that seems to maybe have been a little hesitant to embrace legal marijuana is now taking steps to do so.
Bridget, public policy hat, asking you to pop that one on there.
Yeah.
History, any indication here, given that Massachusetts said, you know what, let's open this up, let's legalize recreational marijuana. But now, as Jordan pointed out, the ballot question giving people an opportunity to walk that back. But is that likely?
I mean, it's hard to tell if it's likely. I mean, I think there hasn't been a state yet that has legalized and then has unlegalized, recriminalized.
I looked for that too.
So so there hasn't.
Yeah.
I think there have been some municipalities. I mean, if you think about prohibition, I mean, you know,
Yes.
or you think about like even tobacco smoking in places, right? Like municipalities moved on rolling things back.
We used
earlier.
to be able to smoke in bars.
Exactly.
Not that I ever smoked cigarettes, but I was around while
Yes.
that was happening. And I remember when that change came by, I was very grateful for it.
Yeah.
But anyway, to your point.
Yeah, so I think that there's and there's been some communities like on the West Coast that have that were looking at putting forward psilocybin and then have thought about rolling back. There's been a kind of a broad discussion, so I think you'll always see challenges. But we haven't seen, I think, a state rollback. But I think it's really interesting, and I think Jordan's read is probably right that if places like South Hadley are looking at both for economics and socially have kind of shifted their concerns, that where they don't feel like it's as worrisome and the fears aren't as high about what will happen with cannabis in the community, I think it's less likely that this ballot initiative will pass.
Chris, in South Hadley, is it likely that this change would come anytime soon, given that they've already said no to it?
Well, it's an elongated process in that there are bylaws, town bylaws that would have to be changed, and that requires a town meeting vote. And with these bylaw changes, it would also require public hearings and all that kind of stuff that goes into leading up to town meeting. At this point right now, they've basically just put this to the town departments for review. So they're really just now in the beginning stages of exploring this. So probably not anything unless they were to call a special town meeting, which there hasn't been any reporting to say that has been broached. You're looking at probably the spring at the earliest for any kind of movement on this in terms of an actual vote.
All still possible. Meanwhile, South Hadley is going to take another stab at a Proposition 2.5 override vote. I believe it's $3.5 million, considerably less than the last two votes. So that's still forthcoming as far as town politics are concerned in South Hadley. Thanks for that reporting out of Reminder Publishing. Berkshire County loses another dairy farm as independent producers struggle. This is the headline on Charlie Greenberg's reporting for the Berkshire Eagle, coming out of Tyringham, the tiny town of Tyringham in South County. After 48 years milking Jersey cows, says Halves Farm is the latest independent dairy farmer in Berkshire County to stop producing milk. After losing Agrimark Cooperative as its milk distributor, which used the farm's milk and dairy products sold under the Cabot and McAdam brands, and facing the ongoing challenges of independent farming, farmer Fred Havel says he's now looking to sell his dairy herd. Now, for context, Tyringham is a very small town, about 430 people, according to the 2020 census, and it's about 16 miles south of Pittsfield. So for folks, where to put the dot on the map, that's where we're talking about. Bridget Davis, I'll start with you. Reaction to this story.
I mean, it's sad, and I think the worry is that with each farm, and especially in any particular industry, so whether dairy in this case, with each one that disappears, the infrastructure for these like Agrimark kind of consolidators, like that help actually get the milk to the distributors, like it's I think with each one that goes down, it's harder to maintain, and so I think we're at, I think, a really tough point in Western Massachusetts. I know that over the years, the reduction in dairy farms has been incredibly high in the Berkshires.
Yeah, some of the stories in the Berkshire Eagle, Fred Haverhill told, he's now 84, and he told the paper he remembers when there were 100 or 100 plus farms in the area. Sarah Gardner, a professor of environmental studies at Williams College, told the Eagle there are now around 10 dairy farms total in the Berkshires. But this is big business. The economic impact study from the State Department of Agricultural Resources in 2025 said that dairy farms contribute more than $61 million to the local economy. And it's also beyond the dollars and cents of it. It's about environmental stewardship. Jordan, so I'm thinking of you here, because these farmers, they're conserving and preserving this land. When you read a story like this, what do you think as an environmental reporter?
Yeah, it's so fragile right now. I think that's the word that comes to mind. We don't know, right? When a farm gets sold like this, what does it become? Farms mean jobs, farms mean revenue, farms mean food. And I think it's just, I don't know, is there going to be, because I assume this is a large tract of open space, is this going to be an attractive site for some major development that, maybe doesn't contribute to the local economy like this does? And so I think we kind of have to keep an eye, right, on what's becoming of all this Berkshire land when the farms are sold.
Now, Fred Haverhill, for his part, he does rent the farmland, and he told the Berkshire Eagle, while he intends to sell the herd, he hopes to keep the farm active. He might start raising beef cattle, but he's also 84. So at some point, I imagine he would like to retire, but I guess, once you have a love, you want to stick to it. But certainly, Jordan, to your point, other farms, not only in the Berkshires, but in Western Massachusetts, have closed. And then you see what that land that is up for grabs becomes. We see it right now in the case with Hampshire College. The college is closing, and we don't know what will become of that land. The other riddle for me on this one, the dollars and cents of dairy milk do not make a ton of sense. If you look at how much farmers are paid, which is $18.84 per hundredweight, which is how milk is sold to distributors according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. But smaller New England farms, it costs them $23 to $30 per hundredweight. So it costs them much more money to make the milk than they're earning in revenue. Chris, not a strong business model or a recipe for success. What are you thinking for these farmers?
It's funny. I was thinking the exact same thing and thinking that I must be missing something because I got into writing because my math skills are not terrific. But the math didn't quite line up for me there. So it's obviously always been a difficult industry to make a living in. But now it obviously is exponentially harder as the costs beyond everything else are going up. And then I think about how when we look at the consolidation of our food providers, how is that going to impact us as consumers as well? So there's another economic impact on top of that.
Yeah, quotable quote for the morning from Sarah Gardner out of Williams College. She told the Eagle, "The work farmers do is not appreciated enough. It's very serious to lose a farm, but it seems like we're just letting them go." So you can check out that reporting in the Berkshire Eagle. You can also check our show notes today on NEPM's website for more details on all of the reporting that we have discussed this morning. My thanks to this week's Rundowners: Chris Mazza, Executive Editor of Reminder Publishing; Bridget Davis, Assistant Professor of Public Policy at UMass Amherst; and on the phone joining us for the first time, a senior reporter with Commonwealth Beacon, Jordan Woolman. My thanks to Phil Bishop, Ayu Suryawan, our Rundown team. I am Carrie Saldo. You have been listening to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM and streaming live on YouTube. Get out there and make it a great Friday and a beautiful weekend. We'll see you right back here next Friday. Thanks so much.